Despite being so tired, I had trouble sleeping in our hotel room in South Fork. In the morning, Julie and I went across the street for a selfie in front of the visitor center. They had CDT stickers. Score. After that, we drove to Creede, where we parked at the spot where she picked me up the day before. The first thing we walked past was a pond that Creede uses for hockey in the winter. Then we walked together for the first and most impressive historic mining facility in the canyons north of Creede. We learned about how the water is cleaned of heavy metals before it is released into the canyon. Under a bridge where milled ore used to be transported down to Creede, Julie and I said goodbye. The hike from Creede back to CDT was only 10 miles, but it was also a 3,000-foot elevation gain. I passed by a lot of mining artifacts. I used Julie's new anniversary present for the first time to navigate the Creede cutoff. It was nice just to flick my wrist and confirm I was on the right path. Near the top of the cutoff, I flicked my wrist and it told me to walk through no trespassing signs. I hadn't considered that the route data I loaded might not be as up to date as far out. Through here, Roadrunner saw a moose, but I wasn't as lucky. 5 hours into the hike, I got back to the CDT and had entered the San Juans. Meanwhile, Julie had driven all the way to Great Sand Dunes and was doing her own exploring. The celebration for getting back on the CDT was short-lived. I still had a hike over a high point and then down into a north-faced basin before the ridge, which of course was covered in snow. Right about mile 1000 on the CDT, I hit the worst snow so far. If there was a marker for the milestone, it was covered in snow. It was pretty late into the afternoon, so the snow was awfully soft. The difficult bit was only 2 miles long, but it took me 2 hours to cross. Post-holding to my knees was frustrating, but post-holding your waist was worst. Each time I had to stomp a flat platform for my feet at the bottom of the post hole, then kick a step about halfway up, gingerly climb out on my hands and knees and crawl forward. When I thought the snow was stiff enough, I'd stand up, but of course that didn't last and the whole procedure had to be repeated. All this was up above 12,000 feet, where each breath was difficult. As Tallboy would say on the PCT, maximum effort, little reward. At least the snowy traverses weren't steep, so there was no danger of me sliding off the mountain. At the end of the climb out of Creede, as I battled my way through the snow, and even during the next few days of the hike, I kept on thinking, I'm so tired. It must have been those 22 miles in just 7 hours, the lack of rest when I was done, and a bad night's sleep. I kept fantasizing about napping in the back of the Chevy Traverse. Julie was going to meet me for lunch at a road crossing in 2 days. Man, lunch followed by a nap in the back of the Traverse? That would be heaven. When I crossed the second saddle of the ridge, the trail was finally snow-free, but now it was nearly 7 and I was the shade of the ridge. I raced down the valley, hoping I'd make it back into the sunlight, but the sun was setting faster than I could walk. I made it to the campsite a little after 8. I'd only hiked 18 miles, but I'd got a late start, and the climb was hard, and the north side of the ridge was even harder. Another bad night of sleep. Gusty winds kept waking me up during the night. The next day wasn't nearly as challenging. It was a pretty cruisy day. I did some extra miles to make up for the day before. I passed a parking lot where there was a trail log. This would be the closest to civilization I got to all day. Cisco and Margarita were now a week ahead of me. Taser had caught up to Hitchmaster. As far as the class of 26 goes, Hitchmaster seemed to have been the farthest along. At mile 1022, I reached the 1,000-mile marker. I guess I didn't miss it after all. This fallen tree, after years of erosion, seemed to have turned into modern art. Looks like there's more people on the trail based on shoe prints. At 4 o'clock, I thought this would be it, my first day on the trail without any other human interaction. But then, way off in the distance, another hiker. When I caught up to him, I discovered it was nomadic Norseman. The last time I thought I was going to be alone on the trail, he popped up then, too. We were nearly out of water, so we committed to camping at the next water source. So, for only the second time on the CDT, I shared a camp spot with another hiker. We had a little tent city. NN was up and going before me, but I caught up to him and passed him. At the water source right before the road crossing, where I'd meet Julie, I talked to No Time. The morning was all downhill, so I got to the road at 10:30. Julie wouldn't arrive for an hour, so I sat and leaned up against a fence. While I waited, I nodded off for a bit. When Julie arrived, we had lunch but no nap in the back. While we were parked there, 3 hikers walked by. Dave camped just up the hill from Northman and I the night before, and a new guy, Paul. After lunch, Julie hiked for a mile with me, but of course off she went and on I went. It was nice to see all the signage for the combined CDT and CT. The CT definitely seems to be maintained better. The trail seemed to be maintained by some pretty serious equipment, digger scoop marks and big old knobby tire prints. And then parked next to the road, the beast that did the work. An internet-style flame war broke out on these signs. The day before, Nomadic Norseman commented that he had lost a water bottle. I wonder if he'd pick up this one that I passed. The trail gives and the trail takes. Snow threatened to block the trail, but in the end it kept its distance. Because of the long lunch with Julie, I had to walk until dark to get my miles. In the end, it was only 23 miles. Dave and No Time's tents at a water source and then put up my tent near Paul's. I wouldn't see Nomadic Norseman again. He'd get to Monarch Pass the day after me and then would be done for the year. He's hoping to do his last section of the hike in 2027 to finally finish the CDT. It was a cold night and it felt even colder in the morning. If I could get 22 miles, I would have a pretty easy walk into Monarch Pass the next day, and then Julie and I could enjoy a half day in the town of Salida. At a water source, I ran into Paul in no time. While we talked, Dave walked by. Man, I can't believe I found myself into a little bubble this late into the hike. I thought I was making pretty good time when I noticed a creek to my right. Wait, I don't remember a creek following the trail on the map. I missed a turn. I hadn't figured out a way to get the whole CDT on my watch yet. If I had, maybe I'd stayed on course. Not only had I gone 0.7 miles in the wrong direction, but now I had to climb up a bunch of elevation I had lost. It was Saturday, so a couple of groups of motorcyclists were using the trail. Motorcycle tracks on that wrong trail I followed was one of the reasons I kept going and missed the turn. Thanks to my mess up, Paul caught up to me. On the last big climb of the day, I was in low gear, but he didn't want to pass me, but rather wanted to use me as a rabbit to set a pace that would get him up and over the hill and to a nicely appointed campsite. When he met me, I had my earbud in, listening to my big climb playlist. When you hike, you talk about weird things, like how I told him about a recent video I watched about the history of military cadence. I made a connection between military cadence and my playlist. I sing under my breath to the songs, which controls my breathing, like the study cited in the video says cadence does to help its participants. The study also stated that military cadence occupies the mind with a simple task that lessens fatigue. I think if I ever get 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to do a live stream going over my big climb playlist. Paul, who I found out was from Ottawa, and I arrived at the camp together. There was a van with a CT section hiker in there and her husband, and then another CT hiker called Les, which of course made me think of WKRP. You ever notice the similarities between WKRP and news radio? Anyway, I saw far out comments about a cabin nearby that hikers can stay in. After some time, I found the cabin, but someone with a truck was moving in. The wind that night was strong and cold. The cabin would have been nice. At the restroom in the morning, I met a guy that stayed in the cabin. He pointed out a moose in the woods. Too bad I'd left my phone in the tent. No picture of a moose, but here's some moose poop as a consolation prize. If I'd gotten to camp earlier, I could have stayed in the cabin. If only I hadn't taken that wrong turn. Since he was done with it, I used the cabin to make breakfast and to repair my pants. I left the cabin around 8 a.m. and started the 10-mile hike to Monarch Pass. I had to climb back up to 12,000 feet right away and then stayed at that elevation until the pass came into sight. It was cold and windy. The snow really slowed me down. Tracks showed that motorcycles could actually get through the snow too. At every patch of snow, I had to decide, go around it or go through it. It was nice to see bicycles and not just motorcycles. So that's how motorcycles get through the snow, I guess. This guy was really interested in me. 2 miles away, I could see Highway 50. Although it looked a lot farther and a lot lower than the 460 feet below that far out said it was. Finally going downhill on a dirt road, I could relax. Text from Julie indicated We'd arrive at the pass about the same time. As she came into sight, I sang her a song, but it was too windy for you to hear me. I'll do my best to recreate the moment. Trail angel, won't you be mine? At the pass, we got lunch and browsed the store. We talked about our separate adventures before heading to Salida to get all my town chores done and to sleep in a comfy bed. Trail stop checklist. Salida. Check.